I called my boyfriend a disgusting pig for knowing so much about his sister's bodies, and he kicked me out of his house. We had been dating for 1 year. He has 3 younger siblings whom he's taken care of ever since he ran away from home because his parents were abusive alcoholics. When he was 18, he gained custody of all of them. He's a hard worker, and from what I've seen, he has never let himself or his siblings go without. They have everything they need, and as far as I know, they've never gone to bed hungry because of him. One of the reasons I fell in love with him was because of that protective side he has, especially toward his siblings. I won't go into all the details about how they manage things, but when I say he takes care of everything, I mean everything, from grocery shopping to helping with homework. He does it all. He's been like both a father and mother at the same time. And on top of that, he finished his studies. The youngest brother even calls him dad. Their parents are the very definition of a total disaster. To this day, they don't even know if they're still alive, and they have no other family. It's just the 4 of them, the only ones left from the entire family. But before I begin, I'd like to invite you to watch part 2, the final part, on my channel, on Reddit. The link is also in the profile. Last night, I slept at his house, and this morning around 6, his 12-year-old sister came into the kitchen crying uncontrollably. She had woken up with blood in her underwear and was terrified. She had gotten her period for the first time. My boyfriend managed to calm her down and explained that everything was fine, that it was completely normal and nothing to be afraid of. He gave her a quick explanation of what was happening and told her that her body was changing. Then he asked her to take a shower to clean up, and explained where the sanitary pads were, the ones her 16-year-old sister used, and told her to use them the way she had been taught. When the girl went to shower, he muttered, "Damn, I thought we still had 1 more year." I don't know if you've ever felt how a single word can crack something that once felt indestructible, but I experienced it that morning. I said, "Disgusting pig," and I watched the light vanish from his eyes in an instant. He didn't yell. He didn't insult me. He just looked at me like I had taken a knife and stabbed him in the stomach. Then, with a coldness I had never seen in him before, he said, "Get out." I was still wearing the t-shirt I had slept in and didn't even manage to properly put on my shoes. I grabbed my half-packed bag, trembling, and walked out of his house with my dignity in ruins. I didn't know it would be the last time I'd ever step foot in there. At first, I told myself he had overreacted, that he was just emotional because of what had happened with his sister, that he needed space. But hours passed. Then days. And I didn't receive a single message or call. He blocked everything, WhatsApp, Instagram, even his email. He disappeared from my life as if I were a threat. I kept telling myself that I hadn't meant what I said, that it was a momentary impulse, that I had made a mistake. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a word. It was betrayal. I had accused him, even if just for a second, of something unforgivable. And he knew it. And his siblings knew it too. One Tuesday afternoon, while I was trying to concentrate at work in a life insurance office in Malaga, a coworker, Antonio, the only one who knew everything, came up to me and whispered, "Your guy's taken a leave of absence." He said he needed time. Time? Why? Is he okay? I asked without thinking, but I already knew the answer. "I don't know," Antonio replied. He looked broken. Like everything had come crashing down. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about how it had all started, about how much I admired Marcos, about everything he had done for his siblings, how he made them breakfast, took them to the doctor, worked so hard to give them what he never had. I had fallen in love with the way he cared, and I attacked him exactly where it hurt the most. That Friday, someone left a bag of groceries at my door. Inside was a note. It just said, "Don't come back." It was his handwriting. I collapsed on the floor. I cried so much it hurt my chest. I felt like a stranger in my own life, a shadow. I tried to help in secret. I used a secondary account to place a large order at the local supermarket near where they lived, paid with my card. I sent school supplies. I left a gift card in their mailbox. I didn't know if they received them or if they threw them away. I didn't care. I just wanted to do something, anything. Until one afternoon, sitting on a bench in front of the Maria Zambrano station, with my hands freezing from the wind, I received a voice message from an unknown number. It was Lucia, the 16-year-old sister. Her voice was firm but filled with pain. "You have no idea what you've caused here. You didn't just break his heart, everyone's. We thought you were different. We thought we could trust you." The audio ended with a silence so long it felt like I had been buried alive. 2 days passed. Then 3. I gave up. I thought that was the end. Until suddenly, on Monday morning, while I was signing a contract at the office, someone walked in without knocking. It was Lucia. She wore a black coat, her hair pulled into a tight ponytail, and a look that allowed no argument. She stared straight at me without blinking. "Hi. Do you want to fix this?" she asked. I could barely nod. "Then shut up and come with me. Don't say a word." I followed her without thinking. We rushed down the stairs. Outside, the air was colder than I remembered. We got into a car. She started the engine without saying where we were going. She only glanced at the rearview mirror and muttered, "I hope you won't regret this, because what you're about to see will change you forever." Lucia didn't say another word after that. She kept her eyes fixed on the road, her hands steady on the wheel, and her jaw clenched as if she were holding herself back from throwing me out of the moving car. Her silence hurt, and so did mine. The drive felt longer than it was. Each corner she turned made the pressure in my chest worse. I wanted to ask where we were going. I wanted to know what exactly was waiting for me. But the truth is, I had already learned that with Lucia, you don't push. When she wants to speak, she speaks. When she doesn't, her silence screams louder than any words. 20 minutes later, we stopped in front of a modest building with a discreet sign, Luz de Vida Association, Shelter and Hope. Before I could ask anything, she was already out of the car. I forced myself to get out too, my steps hesitant, like a child about to be scolded. And deep down, that's exactly how I felt. We went in. The place was clean, welcoming. It smelled like fresh bread and tempera paint. There were children's drawings stuck to the walls, toys organized in transparent boxes, and a small mural with photos, smiles, birthdays, days at the park. And in many of them, there he was, Marcos. Marcos smiling while holding a baby in his arms. Marcos reading a story to a group of children with wide, attentive eyes. Marcos teaching a child how to tie shoelaces. Marcos painting a face on an ordinary Saturday. Marcos being everything I once thought I understood, but now I saw clearly. He wasn't pretending to be good. He was good. "He's in the back," Lucia finally said, "with the new kids." I followed her without question, my stomach in knots. We walked down a narrow hallway to an open area in the back with a few wooden tables, scattered paper, and the sounds of children's voices mixing together. And there he was, sitting on the floor with 3 boys, helping one of them make a paper airplane. His hair was a little longer, his beard unshaven, but he still had that same steady, kind gaze. I froze in the doorway. Lucia didn't call him. She simply crossed her arms and stood there beside me, watching her brother. "He comes here every Saturday. And Sunday. Even when he's exhausted. Even with siblings to care for. Even with a broken heart," she said without looking at me. "And you know what the worst part is? He doesn't blame you. He blames himself. For trusting you." Those words tore me apart more than any scream ever could. One of the boys tugged on Marcos's shirt and pointed at me. He turned his head. And for a second, our eyes met. It was like a slap to the soul. His eyes, which once welcomed me, now passed through me as if I weren't there. No anger. No pain. Nothing. Just absence. He stood up calmly, thanked the kids, and walked off to the side without even glancing back. And in that moment, I understood, there was no greater punishment than the silence of someone who once loved you. I wanted to run after him. I wanted to scream, to drop to my knees and beg for forgiveness in every possible way. But my legs wouldn't move. Lucia was still there, arms crossed, like a sentinel. "You wanted to understand, not to fix it. So start here. He's not going to listen to you yet." But you can see with your own eyes what you trampled on. And I stayed. I stayed until the last child left. I stayed, sweeping the floor, folding paper, stacking books. I stayed without knowing if I would ever be noticed again. I stayed because now I understood, it wasn't about being forgiven. It was about one day deserving to look at him without shame. And so I stayed. The next Saturday, I went back. Not because anyone invited me. Not because I thought I'd be welcomed. But because, for the first time in my life, I understood what emotional responsibility really meant. And I knew that running away would only be one more mistake. I arrived early. I helped organize the painting supplies. I washed the plastic cups still sticky with the smell of Friday's juice. I lined up the chairs in the reading corner. No one thanked me. No one looked me in the eyes. And that was okay. I wasn't there to be received. Marcos arrived last, as always, carrying a bag of groceries in one hand and a homemade cake in the other. The kids ran toward him like he was the real-life Santa Claus, and he, smiling, responded to each one with a warmth that hurt to witness. It hurt because I remembered that smile, and I knew that it no longer existed for me. When he saw me, he hesitated for half a second, just half, and then simply walked past me as if I were part of the doorframe. I stayed in my corner. Lucia, on the other hand, kept throwing me sharp glances. It was as if she were there just to make sure I wouldn't forget for even a second what I had done. And the truth is, I needed that. Weeks went by like that, no contact, no words, not even a trace of attention from Marcos or his siblings. Even the youngest one, who used to run into my arms when he saw me, now hid his face behind Marcos's arm. The silence flayed me from the inside, but I kept going. I swept the floor, cooked rice, told stories, packed donations, never, ever to draw attention. Only to do. It was my way of speaking now that my voice had lost the right to be heard. It was on an ordinary Wednesday when it happened. I had gone to the center to help sort out some donations that were disorganized in the back storage room. I was alone in the small room at the back, hearing only the muffled noise of children playing in the yard, when I heard the door slam open. It was him, Marcos. He entered as if the whole world was collapsing on his shoulders. He dropped the boxes in a corner, leaned against the wall, and for a moment, it seemed like he didn't even notice I was there. His breathing was ragged, his eyes teary, he was trembling. "They're cutting off the power again," he muttered more to himself than to me. I didn't move. I can't keep pretending everything is okay, Lucia. I can't. They see me as a superhero, but I'm not. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying. That's when he saw me, and his face fell. "Ah," he whispered, taking a step back. "Of course. You." I tried to say something, but the words betrayed me. "If you came to witness the damage up close, now you've seen it. You can leave." He turned around. But before he could walk out, I finally managed to speak. "I came because I realized I hurt you in the worst way possible. I'm not here for me. I'm here for you all. And because you deserve someone who stays, even when you don't want them to. Because you always stayed for everyone else." He didn't reply, but he didn't leave either. The silence between us had changed. It was no longer one of disgust, but of two strangers trying to relearn how to breathe around each other. Lucia appeared in the doorway shortly after, watching the scene with that same firm gaze. "He doesn't need forgiveness. He needs peace. If you're going to take that from him too, then you'd better leave now." I just nodded and stayed, more than ever, because now I saw that he was shattered on the inside and still trying to keep everyone else whole. And that made me love him more than I ever had. And maybe that's why it hurt so much when he called me to talk. It wasn't a warm invitation or a friendly gesture. It was just a note left in the donation cabinet in his handwriting, "Today after dinner, back room." My heart nearly jumped out of my chest when I read it. My hands were sweating, my throat dry. I waited all day with my stomach in knots. When the clock hit 7 in the evening, I was already sitting in the empty room, waiting, unsure of what to say or if I even had the right to say anything at all. He came in slowly, closed the door gently, and stood by the wall, looking at me. There was no anger in his eyes, but there was no tenderness either, only exhaustion, the kind that comes from the soul. You wanted to talk. Now's your chance. But after this, we go back to the usual rules: discretion, respect, and distance, he said firmly. I don't even know where to start, I confessed, curled up in that chair, feeling small. Then start from the most honest place, he replied. Why did you call me a pig? The air disappeared from my lungs. I didn't think. It was instinctive. It was stupid. It was cruel. And it was unforgivable. I was scared, of the situation, of the blood, of the responsibility, and instead of reacting with empathy, I attacked. You attacked, he repeated, with a bitter half-smile. And not just me. You attacked everything I am. He took 2 steps forward. Do you know what it means to be called a disgusting pig while you're helping your 12-year-old sister, who woke up crying because she thought she was dying? Do you know what it's like to spend your whole life being told you're worthless, a monster, trash, and then, after years of fighting to rebuild yourself, to hear that from someone you love? I cried silently. But he didn't stop. I'm not a father. Legally, I'm nothing. But I was the one who cleaned up every bit of vomit, who cried silently in the bathroom while calculating if I could afford to buy rice. I was the one who knelt in the bathroom with her that morning. And you ruined it all with one word. One. He sat in the chair in front of mine, his gaze still firm but now with cracked edges. I didn't hate you. I can't. But I feared you. I was afraid that if you could see me like that in such a fragile moment, maybe you had always seen me that way, as a strange, indecent man. One who cares too much, who gets too involved. That's not normal. I finally managed to speak. No, Marcos, I never saw you that way. Never. It was fear, yes, but not of you. It was fear of my own inability to live up to everything you carry. I felt small, useless, and instead of facing that, I attacked. I destroyed what you protect the most, your honor. He lowered his eyes for a moment. And that's why you're here. Because you recognized it, he said quietly. I'm not here to forgive you. I still can't. But I'm here to listen. Because even broken, I still believe people can change. And sometimes the one who wounds can also help to heal. Not the way they want to. But the way they can. In that moment, I knew he hadn't opened the door, he had only unlatched it slightly. It was a beginning, the first crack in that wall of pain I had helped build. I walked out of that room with a wet face, trembling legs, but a heart just a little more whole. He had listened to me. And for the first time since everything happened, I felt that maybe, one day, I might be forgiven. It was the following week when the center's coordinator came in with a proposal, a state event about youth and family rebuilding, focused on real-life stories. They wanted Marcos to be one of the speakers. They wanted to hear the story of the brother who became a father, the man who rebuilt a family from scratch, without support, without a manual, without rest. He refused immediately. I'm no role model, he said, throwing the mop cloth into the bucket. I just did what I had to do. And I still mess up, a lot. But Lucia, with the same firmness she inherited from him, was clear, exactly because of that, Marcos. Because you're not some polished propaganda figure, you're real. And the world needs to hear real stories. We need them to know you exist. He hesitated. In the following days, I saw the conflict on his face, the pull between wanting to hide and the instinct to protect what he had built. I said nothing. I simply stayed close. I offered help with the presentation slides, with the talk structure, with reviewing the key points. He accepted reluctantly, but he accepted. I was still a shadow on the edge, but a present and silent one. On the day of the event, the tension was palpable. The hall was full, educators, social workers, students. There was a table on stage, a microphone, and a huge screen in the back with his name, Marcos Sans, the strength of someone who chose to stay. He walked on stage with slow steps, wearing a simple shirt, his hair pulled back. There was a round of polite applause. He took a deep breath, grabbed the microphone, opened his mouth to speak, and froze. Literally. He fell silent. His eyes scanned the crowd without focus, his hands trembled, his throat closed. The coordinator, sitting in the front row, leaned forward in concern. The tension spread like smoke. I didn't think. I just stood up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaky but steady enough. I climbed onto the stage under everyone's confused gaze, including his. I gently took the microphone from Marcos's hand, but not to replace him. To protect him. "I'm sorry to interrupt. I know I'm not the one you came here to hear. But if you'll allow me, I want to speak about this man right here." He tried to protest, but I had already begun. "My name, well, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I've lived beside this man, and I've seen with my own eyes how he made the impossible feel routine. He didn't just raise siblings. He raised strong, conscious, and upright human beings. He created the kind of family that many people born into well-structured families never managed to build." The room fell silent. I've seen him wake up at 5 in the morning to prepare lunchboxes. I've seen him stay up all night helping with homework. I've seen him work 3 different jobs so that dignity never lacked in the home he built. I've seen him comfort a crying sister who didn't understand what it meant to become a woman, and he did it with more respect, care, and love than many mothers out there. My voice faltered, but I continued. "I know he doesn't feel worthy of this stage. But maybe that's because men like him have never been invited to stand here. He doesn't have a teaching degree or a psychology certificate. But he had the courage to build a home in the middle of chaos. And that is pure heroism." The applause started slowly. Then it grew louder. Some people stood up. I turned to him and saw the smallest, most restrained smile, but it was there. The first since the day everything had collapsed. He took the microphone back, his eyes wet. "Thank you," he said, pausing for a long moment, "for seeing me." And then he spoke. He told his story, without embellishment, without drama, just the truth. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't cry out of guilt. I cried out of pride. And it was from that moment that things began to change, not with hugs, not with apologies, not with any kind of dramatic declaration. They changed the way real things change, little by little, in silence, at the pace of someone who has already lost too much to risk again. The week after the talk, I arrived at the center and Marcos was already there, making orange juice in the kitchen like he always did. When he saw me, he didn't look away, he just said, "There's more fruit in the fridge if you want to help." That was it, the first crack in the wall of tension. I began going to the homes of families to assist with social worker visits. We delivered donations together, filled out forms, and now and then, he even made a dry comment about how terrible I was with paperwork. I pretended to be offended, he pretended to believe me. With time, the siblings began to soften too. The youngest, who once hid his face, started greeting me with a quiet hello. Lucia remained stern, she always was, but one day, when she saw me cleaning paint off the floor after art class, she simply said, "You missed a corner there," and handed me a cloth. It might not sound like much, but I almost cried. I began to be part of the conversations, the contained laughter, the shared glances, not as a girlfriend, not as someone who belonged to that home, but as someone who chose to remain out of respect, even after the wreckage. And Marcos no longer avoided being alone with me. Sometimes we talked about the kids, sometimes about nothing at all. One night, we sat together on the center's terrace, watching the younger siblings play with flashlights in the dark. We didn't speak for half an hour, but he offered me a blanket when the wind got colder, and that gesture said more than any, "I forgive you." There was never a conversation about getting back together. Never a kiss, a possessive gesture, or even a hint. Because sometimes love isn't about reclaiming, it's about respecting boundaries, accepting what remains, and building something new from that. Today, months later, we're still like this. He continues to care for the world with the strength of someone who was once ignored by it. And I remain by his side, not as someone waiting for anything, but as someone who finally understood what love truly is. Because real love is when you don't ask to be loved in return. It's simply being whole, present, rebuilt, without demanding anything more than the chance to do what's right. And that chance, I grab it every day with both hands and a heart that finally learned that regret only matters when it's accompanied by action. And silence, the same silence that once destroyed me, is now the space where, slowly, we are learning to begin again. Days before that farewell, something happened that perhaps was the true turning point between us. It was an ordinary night. The kids had gone to bed early, the center was quiet, and I was washing the dishes slowly, trying not to make noise. Marcos appeared suddenly in the kitchen, holding 2 cups of tea. He set one down near me without saying a word and leaned against the doorframe, watching. Lucia told me you slept on the sidewalk outside the hospital when Miguel was admitted, I said, breaking the silence. He nodded, staring at some distant spot beyond the window. I didn't have money for the bus. Sleeping there was better than going home. Silence. We never talked about that, did we? I continued cautiously. About what it was like before all of this. There's not much to say, he replied, sipping his tea. It was a war, just no one called it a war. They called it home. I turned toward him, hoping he'd say more, and to my surprise, he did. Once, when I was around 10, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of bottles breaking. I hid under the kitchen table and stayed there for hours. My parents were hitting each other, hurting each other, screaming. My mother said she'd rather die than go on living with us, and my father said she was only alive because no one bothered to kill her. His words came out steady, but his eyes were distant. That night, I promised myself no one else would live what I lived. That my siblings would be afraid of the dark because of bad movies, not because of what they heard at home. That they'd wake up to the smell of coffee, not vomit. That they'd grow up knowing what it feels like to be loved, even if only by me. Only by me. I moved closer, almost reverently. I didn't say anything. I just sat in the chair beside him and waited. When you said that word, it was like my mother had come back, you know? That look, that filthy accusation. For a moment, I didn't see you. I saw her. I swallowed hard. Marcos, I don't have words that can erase that. But if I could offer my silence, my listening, my presence as a daily act of apology, I would, for the rest of my life. He looked at me, this time, truly looked at me. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you. Honestly, I don't. But I don't feel anger anymore. And that's already a lot. I nodded with a lump in my throat. That means everything to me. And in that moment, we weren't exes or victims of a badly told story. We were simply 2 survivors of different versions of abandonment, trying, in the only way we could, to build something from the pieces. Not everything that breaks becomes trash. Sometimes it becomes shelter. The next week felt lighter. There was something in the air, not a declared joy, but a tensionless stillness, as if everyone around us was finally breathing a little easier. As if the siblings, the kids at the center, and even I had finally found a rhythm. On Friday, Lucia sent me a message, Saturday, 3 in the afternoon. Chocolate cake and blue balloons. Don't be late. I read and reread it, trying to understand if it was what it seemed to be. It was Miguel's birthday, the youngest, the same one who had gone months without even looking at me, without even accepting a piece of candy from my hand. I arrived early, as always. I helped with the decorations, folded napkins, arranged the juices. But this time, something was different. No one asked me to do it. I was simply included. The children were ecstatic, running around in colorful hats. Lucia organized everything with her usual military efficiency disguised as coldness. Marcos tended the improvised barbecue, laughing at something a volunteer had said. And I just watched, trying to take in every detail. When everyone was called to sing happy birthday, I sat in a corner. It was his party, his family, and I still didn't know if I was part of that. Then Miguel saw me. He stopped in the middle of the circle and, with the naturalness only a child can have, pointed at me and said, "Come over here too. You always help blow up the balloons." I stood up slowly, not sure what to do with my hands. When I got near the cake, Marcos stepped to the side. He made space, small, but clear. We sang together. The birthday song was off-key, joyful, sincere. And I was there among them, almost feeling like I was part of it again. When they started handing out pieces of cake, Lucia came toward me. For a moment, I thought she was going to ask me to hand something to someone. But no, she held out a plate with a generous slice. No walnuts. I know you don't like them, she said without looking at me. That was it, and it was everything. I sat on the same bench as before, in the garden corner, savoring that cake more carefully than any dessert in my life. And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, Marcos came and sat beside me. How was work this week? He asked, eyes fixed on the kids. I smiled. Exhausting. The insurance company changed the system, and no one knows how to use it yet. It's like teaching a horse to use a spreadsheet. He chuckled, a short, quiet laugh, but real. You'll get it. You always do, even if by force. We talked for about 20 minutes about trivial things, traffic, natural juice recipes, the last movie he watched with his siblings. Nothing about the past. No mention of mistakes. No pointed remarks. Just two adults sitting on a bench at a community center, exchanging words like someone planting seeds, without rush, without any guarantee of a harvest, but with the certainty that the soil now was less barren. And I understood, peace doesn't enter with a speech. It slips through the cracks. And that day, for the first time, the window was slightly open. 2 weeks after that party, Marcos asked to talk. It was after a calm afternoon, with the kids painting posters and Lucia cleaning brushes with a face that showed she didn't hate me quite as much anymore. We sat in the dining room, just the two of us. He didn't beat around the bush. I got a call yesterday. An NGO from another city. A steady job. A contract. A big house with facilities for kids. Free psychological support for my siblings. A decent salary. And peace. The word hung in the air, peace. Sounds wonderful, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah. But it's far. I waited for him to say more, but he didn't. He just looked at me as if waiting for me to react somehow. So I took a deep breath, looked into those familiar eyes, and simply said, go. He raised an eyebrow. Just like that? No speech? No clinging? I smiled slightly. You don't owe me anything, Marcos. And if that place is even a little lighter than here, you've waited too long to have that. For a second, I saw something break inside him. But it wasn't anger, it was fear. I don't want to seem ungrateful. You've helped so much. I didn't help so you'd remember me, I interrupted. I helped because it was the right thing. And because even if we never become anything again, I'll always want to see you doing well. That's all. And it's enough. In the days that followed, I became an active part of the process. I organized the kids' paperwork, reviewed their school enrollment, printed ID copies and certificates, scheduled exams, delivered notebooks, scrubbed the dirtiest sneakers. On the last day, Lucia hugged me, without warning, without words. A short, tight hug. Miguel gave me a drawing made with colored pencils, him, Marcos, and me with a giant cake. He wrote, "Thank you for always staying close," in crooked, bold letters. Then the morning came. The van was parked in front of the center with all the luggage already packed. Marcos was talking to the driver while the siblings ran around, nervous and excited. I stood at the doorway with a box in my arms, the last documents, the last snacks, the final instructions. He walked over slowly. "You'll stay?" I nodded. Someone has to keep the paperwork in order and teach the next volunteer not to fry the rice. He laughed, really laughed. We stood in silence for a while. The morning breeze drifted past us, soft, almost sad. "Thank you for staying, even when you couldn't stay with me," he said, eyes fixed on mine. I smiled. A single tear fell, but it wasn't from pain, it was from relief. "Thank you for letting me stay, even when you had every reason to hate me." He touched my shoulder, squeezed it gently, and got into the van. I stood there until the vehicle turned the corner and disappeared. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't collapse. I just breathed. Because sometimes, the greatest form of love isn't fighting to stay together, it's helping the one you love to leave freely. And when I turned to go back inside, I saw the children's mural in the hallway. Among the photos, a new one, Marcos, Miguel, and Lucia holding a handmade sign that said, "Choosing to stay is the most beautiful part of love." And I chose to stay, whole, rebuilt, and in peace. Did you enjoy the story? Leave a comment with your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and until the next video, goodbye.